like we
All
are
right,
live.
we're live. Yeah,
Awesome.
Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Thank you for coming. We are excited to have you here. This is the first of 5 sessions we're doing on this topic of our motto at Industrial Logic, which is better software sooner. And this is a session that's going to be focused on the word better. We're going to have a session on the word software and one on the word sooner. And then we're going to have 2 sessions on some case studies that look at all 3 words, better software sooner, in respect to some actual client work we've been doing. So we're super excited to have you here. Please ask some questions. We would love to answer some questions you may have. And there's a comment section. We can quickly, read those comments. Let's just first begin just with a quick round of intros. Jay, do you want to start us off?
absolutely. Sure. My name is Jay Mansaray, and I am a product coach at Industrial Logic.
Thank you.
I,
Wyatt.
I am Wyatt Sutherland. I'm a senior consultant at IO.
And I'm Josh Kereivsky. I'm the CEO of Industrial Logic. So why don't we get started? And I want to hand it over to Jay to talk about the word itself, better.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh. I think better software sooner, obviously better. It's a pillar inside of our model, Industrial Logic, about how we help organizations and teams get to build better products, better software. Wyatt brought up something really interesting right before we started, which was talking about better in terms of software instead of perfect. I think that's a really great thing to emphasize and to call out, because a lot of times I think what we focus on in organizations and our teams and our work on a daily basis is, how do we build the best thing? How do we build a perfect thing? How do we make everything right? And the reality is, a lot of times that stifles us from making any progress at all, because we don't realize that it's the journey to get towards that idea of perfection that really builds strong teams and strong products and strong relationships with our users. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation today. And I'm really glad Wyatt called that out, because I think that's a really important thing to focus on when we're talking about better, right?
Yeah, better is a journey. Yeah, perfection is a journey. It takes will to make things better.
It
Yeah.
does. Talk about the status quo a little bit, right? Because, the status quo is the enemy maybe of better.
Absolutely. Right. Because I mean, the idea is, we obviously all want to be the best at our jobs. We want to be the best in our fields. We want to be the best at what we do. But the reality is that the best is always a moving target, right? And that the best has to exist in a realm of reality outside of just theoretically in our minds, right? We can think of a lot of things that we want to do, that we could do, that are, potentially possible 10, 15 years down the line. But what does that mean for the things that we produce today? And what does that mean for the things that we can potentially produce tomorrow, right? And so a lot of times I think the status quo is, we feel a sense of guilt, or maybe a sense of like shame around acknowledging, I can't be the best thing, or the best thing that produces is not the thing that we're producing now. But the reality is, there's a lot of opportunity, in Wyatt's point, in the journey of getting to the best, right? Am I better tomorrow than I and then can I be better tomorrow than I am today? Can I be better next week than I am this week? Can we be a better team, a better organization, have a better relationship next year than what we have with our customers now? And in the short term, it may seem like you're losing, or you're not doing good enough, or you're not trying hard enough. But the reality is, you're creating the foundation for you to reach that best, right? They always say, like, Rome's not built in a day. You don't import 1,000, 2 million ton stones in one day. You start with the foundation and you slowly build upon it, and having better in mind, right? Meaning that I'm making the changes that I can right now. I'm making the improvements that I can right now. I'm a little bit better today than I was yesterday. I'm a little bit better tomorrow. Those are really the things that over time have a massive impact on the organizations that we're working in and with, and have a massive impact on even people's morale when they're showing up to work. So
Absolutely. And I want to underscore what you're saying, because it's better in all aspects of what we do in our work. So we could talk about better management.
Mhm.
And there's different kinds of management. There's financial management, and there's risk management, and there's all kinds of ways. There's better teamwork, right? Jay was just talking about that before we started here, how that's one of her obsessions, is better teamwork. There's better software design. There's better quality. There's better flow to production. There's better outcomes for your customers, right? Just
Right.
better outcomes. So you want your customers to be successful. How can you make their life better, make their experience of your product better? There's better collaboration amongst teams, right? If it's not just one team, it's a collaboration of many teams. Well, how do you make that better? There's better psychological safety, right? We often spend a lot of time here in Industrial Logic looking at that topic and trying to improve the psychological safety. Lots of better forecasting. Wyatt can talk your ear off about that. And how important forecasting is on large complex projects where you kind of need to know what you're doing. So where do we want to begin? Because there's so many betters. What's a really important better to either of you two?
Wyatt, go ahead. I feel like you've been doing this way longer than I have and have so many stories and have so much experience in getting people to embrace better and work towards that. I'm curious about your thoughts.
Well, sort of from the top, I just want to say that better financial management, like right out of the gate, if we apply these ways of working, these advanced techniques, and just continuously trying to improve the thing that we do every day or aspects of what we do every day, that we will lower the cost of projects. We will increase the quality, we will increase the speed of delivery, we will increase the safety, we will increase the feedback, the things that Jay was talking about earlier, and we will drive the cost of development down. So that's the first thing I just want to lead with, is that these techniques, these ways of working, advanced ways of working, will lower the cost of software development. They will.
Absolutely. What are some things that you feel like, or what are some of the bigger patterns or trends that you see when getting teams to understand how improving their process can affect their bottom line when it comes to the cost of software?
Well, go in with an eye and an ear of finding waste, just looking at any waste. It could be the silos in another team and dependencies, and finding ways to encapsulate those dependencies. If you can't do that, look inside the team. Do you have gated code reviews? Do you have pull requests? There are ways of working inside the team that we can reduce the overhead of that. Those are small things, right? And every penny adds up to $1. And dollars, hundreds of dollars. So always go in looking, having an eye for finding ways of reducing waste.
Nice.
And maybe producing more value. Like how could we make the customer's experience so much better? How can we make our teammates' experience better every day? Right? I think there's a lot of people that will say, if you take care of your team, they'll take care of your customer, right? So what does it mean to take care of your team? Well, probably dealing with the things that aren't as good as they could be, and how can you make them better?
Mm-hmm.
That's an active thing you have to do. But I want to address the elephant in the room to me, which there's a lot of places where people don't focus on better.
Yeah.
Right. I always talk about tennis. I'm really sorry, but I know people that will play for years and years and years and years and years, never take a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not getting better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, maybe they're enjoying themselves, they're having fun, but I'm like, wow, you've been playing tennis for 15 years and you can't even do this, or because you're not learning. So where does learning, like the active decision to learn and to improve yourself, where does that come in to this betterment?
Yeah, I think the assumption that a lot of people make in a lot of different areas, and I'm glad you mentioned tennis, because a lot of these concepts expand beyond software, right? And a lot of times that's really interesting because it's those lessons we learn outside of a work environment that we bring into the work environment. I think people assume that when you do something over and over again, or when you do something for a long time, that better is just an automatic process, right? And I think when we look at things like tennis and we look at athletes, that's not true, right? There's a ton of investment that they make in coaches and training and mobility and stretching and strength and biometrics in order to improve their performance, right? And those are the things a lot of times that we don't see when you're just watching the game, or when you're just showing up, and playing with your friend. You don't know the hours that they're talking to a personal coach about, hey, how do I better my backhand? How do I get more agile on my feet, right? And it's important that, and I appreciate the fact that Industrial Logic takes that perspective in the work that we do, and when we're working with clients, and applies that to the work, right? What are the things that we can do to get better incrementally, right? If you, like to your point of tennis, You don't just say, hey, I want to be Serena Williams tomorrow. Right? Fix all the things right now, right?
10,000 hours.
Condense them to a week for me, right? You don't fix all the things in one day, right? You go and you see a coach for strength. You go and you see a coach for mobility. You go and you see a coach for nutrition, and you make incremental progress a little bit at a time. Like that's why it takes years and years and years to get great. I'm curious about, Josh, at your level as a CEO, and as you're talking to other executives and CEOs about implementing better practices in the organizations. I think for myself and Wyatt, when we're talking to maybe managers or even at the team level, that turnaround time for results is quick, right? When you're talking about flow, when you're talking about getting cards to it, we have a shorter window to show people the effects of the changes that they're making to be better. At that level of leadership, when you're talking about executives, when you're talking about the C-suite, sometimes that change, right, is a little bit longer, right? Necessarily, shorter cycle times on cards doesn't necessarily mean a better bottom line for an organization. What are some of the conversations you're having at that level of leadership with people to get them to understand, hey, this is what your cycle of better is going to look like. These are the things that you're going to be looking for. And this is also the realistic timeline that you can expect to see it, right? Because I think that's another part, is that we expect to see things tomorrow, not realizing sometimes it takes 6 months.
Right.
You know what I mean? You got to stick with it for a while.
Well, I think at the C-suite, you're really the best C-suite folks are the ones that make it super clear what they're going for, right? Mm-hmm. What the company needs to do. We worked with one CTO years ago, and this company was struggling. They do about 5 months of work and then 7 months of fixing bugs and readying the software for release. And he was just like, this is not working, okay? And so he made it super clear that they did yearly releases of their software. But the CTO made it super clear, we want to move to an 11-in-1 world, 11 months of development, maybe 1 month of readying. Now, in our extreme programming lean style, that even that's way too slow. But that was his clear goal to the organization, to get to 11-in-1. And he made it super clear. He got the help he needed to bring in. He brought in myself and Jim Highsmith, a few others, to create a program that would lead to that result. We had an all heads meeting where we made it super clear we're going for this goal, this overarching goal, and then supported them in making that journey. And yes, it took many months, but it actually, happened. So that clarity of vision and what you're going for is super important to the betters, all the little betters that are going to help you get to that bigger better.
Nice.
What about specifics? Let's talk a little bit about specifics. Like Jay, for example, you mentioned to me once about how you work on better feedback. Can you talk a little about that in the product context?
Absolutely. So better feedback, I think, is really important, because a lot of times in many places, right, ultimately, ideally, I would say the goal is we have really good feedback from our users, right? We understand our customers really well. We understand our users really well. And we're making, customer-centered product, user-centered products, right? We're really deep diving and wanting to understand our users and how they feel about the things that we're producing. But what is that feedback loop? Right? How often are you checking in with your customers? How often can you get feedback about your users' behavior and interaction without having to do a formal survey, right? Or waiting for someone to text back? What are the built-in mechanisms that you're putting into your user's journey or into your customer's journey to say, okay, when they do this thing, we can tell it's a reflection or it's indicative of this, right? Or when we do this thing, it's an indication of that. I think when it comes to product, a lot of times when we talk about better metrics, sometimes it's even deciding on what the metrics are that are actually reflective of whether or not what we're doing is effective, right? So we can say like, oh, we sold 10,000 units of this thing, right? But how are people using the thing? You know what I mean? It's actually, like it was up 10,000 products, and that's not just, and it might be a great product, but you also may just have a really great marketing sales team, right? You may have good marketing, and it's really and are just great at putting it in people's hands, but they're not staying customers, they're not lasting customers, they're not returning customers. And so even just deciding on what the metrics are, and a lot of times, we've seen it. You fudge the metrics a little bit because you don't want to, you fudge the metrics a little bit. You measure things because it's convenient and because it looks good. The numbers look good on the slide. But realistically, when we're talking about long-term down the line, what are the values that your customer holds? What are the values that your users hold, right? That you are trying to fulfill, right? Or that you are trying to meet and align with. And what are the things that you can actually measure that are a reflection of those things, right?
Yeah.
And so I think when it comes to product, those metrics sometimes get a little sticky, and those conversations can get a little bit hard because sometimes it's not as tangible as a sale, right? How
Yeah.
do you, if you software, have you built in to know, how often your customer uses your product? How do you know how often they're staying on the product? Are you tracking that in an automated way without just having to send out, or add a feedback link at the bottom that they may or may not click, right?
Right.
So from a product perspective, I think that's really important. And a lot of times those conversations can be uncomfortable, right? Because you can say, hey, we built this great thing that we think is fantastic, but maybe it missed the mark a little bit. Maybe some priorities that you thought were your customer held weren't necessarily priorities for your customer. And the reality is that something else was.
Right.
Are you open enough? And this is where a conversation comes in when it comes to like management and leadership. Are you creating an environment where your customers can say, where your teams can say, and your employees can say, hey, this is the hypothesis that we had about what our customer would value. This is the result of that, right? We didn't hit that mark, right? We didn't hit the target that we wanted to hit. But what we did learn is this. And based on what we learned, this is what we want to do next. Are you creating that environment where people are comfortable to say, hey, we tried something and it didn't work, but we learned and we know how to implement our learnings? Or are you creating an environment where you have to get it right the first time?
Yeah, and I want to just mention something that you brought to mind here, because let's go back to that salesperson that was so good and sold 10,000 units.
Yeah.
They're walking on the moon. They're like, I am the bee's knees. I sold 10,000 of these things. I am great. Now, you pointed out that very few people are using this thing, right? Potentially, right? So how do you get that person who thinks they've done a great job as as a virtuoso? They're a virtuoso salesperson, but they're not part of I'm using musical language because Wyatt's heavily involved in the music field, right? How do you become a concert, a symphony, rather than just the virtuoso, soloist who did really well in the sales? Because to be really better, you have to look at the big picture.
That's right.
That's harder, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's interesting. When I, at a previous role, when I was working in business development, we were selling a technology to different areas, right? And part of selling, they were doing a great job in the sales department, right? And in my perspective, working in the technology side, I was like, oh, this feature and that feature and these things. And I'm talking to the tech team and they're like, it does this and it does that. It does this and it does that. And all these capabilities and the APIs and the data was coming and take selfies and all these things. But when I talked to the sales team, they said, oh, well, they like it because it supports their homelessness program. And they like it because they can use it for new and upcoming restaurants. They like it because it can support business owners. And sometimes it is, to your point, instead of making it one virtuoso versus a symphony, sometimes it is a matter of bringing that person to the table, right? How often do we bring other areas of organizations to the table with the tech, right? To talk about, hey, when you're doing your thing, when you're talking to your portion of the customers, when you're doing your part of the work, what are the things that people are getting excited about?
Right.
Right. Maybe it's not a functionality. Maybe it is. It supports this social program, or it supports this thing, or they like this part of the design. What are the things that they're getting excited about? And sometimes we have to reconcile with ourselves that the things that we get excited about may not be the things that our user gets excited about, right? And so starting to get excited and maybe shifting the mindset of getting excited about the customer getting excited.
Right. Right. And where is the baby ugly, right? We think everything we do is great in here. We love ourselves. We do such awesome work. Let's have a positive culture. But if you don't actually look at the baby and go sometimes, well, where could the baby be a little prettier, or ugly baby? Jay, I know you are currently interviewing Industrial Logic customers about our website.
Yeah.
Right? So we've been revamping our website over the last, many months. And we think we did a nice job, but we want to hear what the customers think, because maybe the baby's ugly.
Absolutely. And even to that point, right? Like, getting a myriad of feedback, right? Some people loving the design and loving the layout, and some people not necessarily liking and not liking the layout, wanting to see different things or wanting to see parts of the website on other parts of the website or condensed or mixed together a different way. And even in that, again, it can be easy to say, hey, these people love it, right? And the people that love it, we love. And so that's what we're going to stick with, right? We love that they love it.
those folks.
That's all we need to hear, right? But the reality is, who's giving you what feedback, right? And what relationship do you want with the types of customers that are giving you the feedback? The reality may be the customers that you love and that you already have, in your cycle, say it's fantastic. But the customers that you want and the customers that you don't necessarily have a hold of do not. And that's where you have to make those decisions about maybe, again, adjusting your definition of better, adjusting your scope of better, because where you want to go, right, requires more or requires differently of you.
Right.
So all of these, so this reminded me of a story. I'll just try to be as brief as I can. So one of our clients, we've been encouraging the engineers to speak up if they had an idea. And so there's this project that was funneled into this team that we were coaching. And I think it was about $200,000, maybe $250,000 project. And the engineer said, how do we know that the customer really wants this? And so they said, well, they've got to want it because it's part of the reward system. And he said, why don't we just ask them if they would opt in or opt out for it? And he said, it'd be really cheap for us to do this. And so they put it out there as an opt in or opt out. And 80% of the reward customers opted out.
Mm.
And so that said to them, don't invest in this program.
Right.
Which is terrific financial management, going back to your term earlier, Wyatt,
Exactly.
right? You're not going to invest in that particular feature now because you've discovered it's not so important to your customers.
That's right.
So a lot of what we do at Industrial Logic is looking at the whole life cycle of better in terms of everything. Should we build it? If we are going to build it, how can we have excellent teamwork? How can we know if we are actually better? What parts of the baby are actually ugly and need to be improved? Where are our blind spots, right? So get better at seeing, from the perspective of a customer. And then, of course, better quality. Quality is a big part of what we do here, right? I mean, Wyatt, you work closely with teams to make for high quality software development.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, I mean, basically, we look at defects coming back. We look at how long it takes to remediate those defects. And then, we just start measuring. We measure cycle time and throughput. And we try to find ways of reducing the cycle time and increasing throughput and making smaller batches and the things that we work on. There are a myriad of different ways. There's so many levers and knobs that we can turn. We just do one thing at a time and always making sure that we find a way to improve it, always making it better, continuously improving the process, whatever the process is.
I like that. And it kind of speaks to, there's a comment in the comment section from Perry. It says, lots of practice does not make you perfect. It makes what you are currently doing permanent. You need to be practicing the right techniques if you want to be better. Right. And so those little ways, what are the little things that you practice over and over again to start to become habit? Right.
Yeah. So the one thing that I always try to instill in folks that we're working with is develop an eye and an awareness and a willingness to be critical, to find ways to improve. To Josh's analogy of playing the tennis or playing the cello or playing the violin, we always want to make sure that we are being critical and being able to analyze how can we make it better. Listen when we're practicing, looking at the metrics when we're working. Just having that eye for that. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is being able to identify the waste in the system and always reducing it, so then we can improve the speed and the accuracy and the safety of delivering.
Yeah, and Jason's got a great quote here. Jason Hobbs, it might not be the most positive sentiment language, but there's magic in, quote, let's look for ways this sucks and then endeavor to make it suck less.
That's right.
I happen to be watching, I'm late to the game, but I'm watching The Bear on Hulu, which is about this restaurant, right?
Yeah.
And when this one character goes to this world-class restaurant and gets to basically experience what a absolute top-notch world-class restaurant, how it runs, his whole world starts to change, and he starts
Mhm.
to see, boy, I suck and we suck, and look at what these folks are doing. Like that's the top of the game, and he gets inspired
Yeah.
to change his whole way of being in the world, to seek for more perfection, and just to get way better than
Yeah.
what he was. That is an amazing turnaround for him. And I just think, we have to be able to look at what's ugly. And I think you also have to have experts sometimes come in and help us see that. I don't
Yeah.
think every team can just see it, because there are a lot of times they're just used to seeing the status quo. They're not even aware of better techniques.
That's right. You
So
see what you understand and see the environment that you're in. It's hard to see anything different.
yeah, we have another quote here. Joe Manich. Hey, Joe. I worked with Joe years and years ago back at a company where we Ansys, that we helped to help them improve to be far more agile in their software development. Um, and yeah, so Joe's saying you also measure. Metrics are an important part of the improvement journey. You cannot improve what you do not measure. So absolutely. I mean, we try to talk about meaningful metrics. Sometimes metrics can get in the way if they're not meaningful. We've heard of companies where they're like, hey, you need to have 100% test coverage, and then people start writing these horrible automated tests that actually don't test anything, but from a coverage perspective, it looks as if they're real tests, and they're not.
Yeah.
So,
You
like,
can still have defects even with 100% test coverage.
right, so we want meaningful metrics, the kind of things that actually matter. And that's looking at across the board, some from customer metrics, like, are they using this feature, right? Or down to code quality metrics,
Mhm.
and even metrics about happiness within the team, right? Like, how happy are folks here? Are they enjoying this new way of working, or whatever?
Yeah, and I think it's important too to put metrics in the proper context sometimes, that all metrics are not equal and that all metrics do not necessarily work together, right?
Yes.
Understanding that certain metrics, if they're improved, are going to decrease others. And I say that in the context I learned from one of an IO consultant a couple years ago. He said something that really hit me. He said, profits are not a metric, they're a constraint, right? And in that, he meant when you build a product for your customer, or for your user, the user or the customer doesn't care how much money you make from your product or service. That's not valuable to them, right? Their experience is valuable. But the reality is that for an organization or for a company to exist, that finances have to be a thing. And so in that aspect, sometimes in order for you to meet that goal, right? In order for you to meet that metrics of more profit or more profitability or higher profit margin, you may have to lower the metric on another aspect of the product. Everything doesn't always go up together. And
Yeah.
that's also another tough conversation that sometimes, is necessary for your business, right? If you sell I don't know, headphones, and the best headphones for your user would be 24 karat gold, right? That's going to severely impact your profit margin. Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
However, like that, if you want to give the best thing to your customer satisfaction, that take you through the roof. Reality is that's not going to happen. So we can settle for stainless steel, right? We can settle for copper or bronze, a less costly metal. You know what I mean? But that's also, is that going to bring down your customer satisfaction? Sure. Right. But is it enough of a trade-off between those two things where everyone can be happy? Your customer is so satisfied with a cool looking product, and your suite and your leadership are so satisfied with a decent profit margin, right? So sometimes that's a great call out about metrics. They don't always all work together. They don't always go in the same direction. And sometimes metrics are really a constraint on other ones. So
Yeah.
Josh, you want to wrap this up for us? We have about a
Yes.
minute.
Well, why don't we do this? Let's just say, what is it that? How would you want to summarize this? Your relationship with the word better. So, Jay or Wyatt, what's your relationship with this word?
It's a journey, and you have to engage your will.
absolutely. I second, it's a journey. I'm getting better every day. You can choose to join me or not.
I love it.
I would hope you choose the former.
Yeah.
Better is what drives me. Whether it comes to like better cooking, better vacations, better management, better everything. I'm just interested in discovering and learning how to get better,
Yeah.
and be humble about, I don't know everything, and there's a lot of blind spots, and I can learn. But if I can learn, I'm feeling like life's worth living and it's better. Things are getting better. I love that.
I love that.
And then when can people expect to see the next one? Sorry.
Sorry. Oh yeah, great. So we will have these sessions every week for the next 5 weeks or 4 weeks after this one. So next week at Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, there'll be the next session on the word software. What do we mean by software? Why do we want to even talk about that word? So we're going to talk deeply about what the heck we mean by software. How should it be soft? And then we'll follow that with Sooner and then a couple of case studies. So hope to see you back here. Wyatt, Jay, thank you so much for this.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone who joined, and take care, everyone.
All right, cheers.